Hello, this is a quick Grim Dawn newbie tutorial, explaining all the stuff to prevent you from being banned from Reddit's Grim Dawn page. First, things you need to know. If you're playing on Steam, you will want to disable cloud saving. To do that, simply open Steam, find Grim Dawn, right-click on it, go to Properties, Updates, and down at the bottom, uncheck the Enable Steam Cloud Sync. Hit Close, then restart Steam and start the game. If you find that Steam's Cloud Sync is grayed out and checked off, you need to open Steam and go to the Steam menu, Settings, Cloud, and uncheck everything there. Then hit OK and restart Steam. It's important to remember that if you disable Cloud this way, all your Steam games will no longer cloud save, so you may want to enable that in the future. Now, what we're here for, the basic Grim Dawn interface. The first thing you'll notice is how awesome my characters are, but you won't have any characters. So before making your own characters, you'll want to specify a few in-game options to blah 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 make your own experience all the more yada yada. So, first we want to click on options, then look at the tabs we get. General, key binding, audio, video, and network. Yay, we could read. I'm not going to spend any time on the graphics or audio settings because that depends on each person's computer hardware and setup, but I do want to point out a few features of the general tab. Most of these are self-explanatory, but some of them are quite useful to know what they do. The first is quick sell. What that means is when you speak with an NPC to sell your junk, you can right-click your items in the inventory and sell it directly. You don't need to drag and drop. Some people like to drag and drop because it gives them a second chance to, rethink what they're doing. Oh shit, what am I doing? Second, auto item tooltips. This is for when you're out in the world and some items drop and you want to view the item's stats without actually picking up the item. Oh, that looks like shit. It will compare it to your equipped item. The rest of the options here you can play with yourself. I personally prefer to have the enemy highlight feature set to off. I find the highlighting to be a bit too user-friendly and arcadey, but I'll leave that to your own personal preference. So let's go up to the key bindings. As you can see, we have all the keys you can bind and set up to your liking. But I want to show you a few binds that are quite useful. The show loot binds are useful for when you're out hunting and you've set your item filter level to only show specific tier of item drops. You get all that? If you hit this button that I have as spacebar or middle mouse, it will show me all the loot that is above gray or above common, even though my constant item filter is epic and above or green and above. You can also bind one of your keys to show you all the loot, which I have as Z. Quick switch is a great option to have that you can bind to a key, like I have for F1. What it does is it swaps the main skill bar from your primary to your secondary. On my secondary, I usually use it for buffs and potions, and for my main bar, I use it for all the skills that I mash really hard with my fingers. At the bottom is move. What this does is allows you to move your character with a key, for instance W, like I have it bound here. That way you can simply hold down the key to move instead of left-clicking and moving all over the screen and developing carpal tunnel syndrome. Ah, my fucking wrist! Now the network tab. It's quite simple. It's where you can test your network settings to see if you're capable of being seen on the network. You have an option to enable UPnP. That means Universal Plug and Play. And what that does is if you're behind a router, the game will try and molest your router and do things to it, changing its ports, and it may or may not clean up after it's done. Either way, if your router likes UPnP, you should keep it enabled, then run the test. Grim Dawn will test your router, and if it displays the WAN IP address correctly, you should be good to host and play games online. If it doesn't, well, then that's a totally different tutorial, but just make sure you open up your ports on your router to your computer of 27,016. That's 27016, and you should be okay. For Steam, anyway. I want to note that in order to play online in the same difficulty as somebody else, you must have that difficulty unlocked beforehand in order to join. Also, you can see the different difficulties in the section on the right. And of course, there is free-for-all loot, which everyone can see and scrounge for. Then there is instance loot, for people who don't like to share. I call those people assholes. Now, to end this tutorial, because I have shit to do, let's quickly look at the in-game interface. Wasn't that the purpose of this whole thing? Known as the Heads-Up User Display, Reactive Personal Data Identifier Verification Responder Intake Unit, otherwise known as HUD, the HUD. First you have your health bar, and to the right of that, you have your energy bar. Hold on, because shit gets even more complicated than that. You have your skill bar that you can put skills on. Your main left and right click skill bar to assign skills or potions. You also have, if you go to your skill window, then to your devotion tab, certain devotions give skills at the end of its tree. For instance, I have Tsunami. I can bind that skill to level it up by left-clicking it and assigning it to a skill that I currently use, like Sky Shard. That way, whenever I use Sky Shard, I help level up the Devotion skill. Makes sense, don't it? These can prove beneficial depending on your class, though how they're beneficial, I don't know yet. Now, you see this button right here on the right? That changes the minimap size in the top right corner, like so. Amazing. On the left side, we have a loot filter button. This will filter out all the loot shown on the ground by default. You can choose between all, common and above, magic and above, epic and above, and so on. Click, click. This interacts with the key we talked about earlier, spacebar, that I had bound to show me loot, meaning you can have your loot filter show only epic items all the time, but then hit spacebar and it will show you common plus items, or magic plus items, or all of the items on the ground. Now the center of the interface is the most annoying feature. It's called a clock. Some players suspect that it's a countdown to remind you when you need to go to bed. I don't really agree with that theory. I think it has something, it's more inclined to be like a DLC related or something like that. I don't know. I don't want to make any assumptions. If you hover over it though, it will display, then it disappears. If you click it, it will stay on the top of your screen until you click it again. Yeah, like that. The last thing I want to show you is storage. There are a few buttons in your inventory that will auto-combine and auto-sort your items. If you haven't found them already. If you have two of the same components and they're together in your inventory or in the storage, you can hit this button to combine them. It will quickly combine them together, so instead of having one out of however many components, you now have two out of however many components together. Once you have them combined, you can move them all over your inventory and save space. You can shift left click items for fast access to and from rather than drag and drop to and from your inventory to the storage. Also, you can auto sort each of your individual bags, and you can auto sort your storage inventory. You can also look at the transfer items tab, and along the left hand side you can buy more inventory slots. A lot of people are unaware of these tabs, but I think it coincides with the monster highlighting. It doesn't. Either way, this top button up here, usually bound to W, which I have unbound, is for hot swapping weapons. I don't use it, so I don't need it to be bound, but you don't have to bind it. It's usually bound to W. Could I say the word bound more? But it's basically to hot swap weapons. Why would I do something like that? Well, let's say for instance you're fighting a mob who's weak to fire, and you have a mace that does fire damage in your main slot, and in your second slot you have a vitality damage something or other, and you want to quickly swap to beat the monster over the head with it. Instead of opening up your inventory and changing the weapons and manually dragging and dropping and swapping and doing all of that other crap, you can hot swap here and you're good to go. So no, you probably didn't lose your weapons, you hit the W key. Well, that's it. Hope you enjoyed this little heads up something or other. I don't plan on making any more in the future because they're not fun to do. Yeah. And no one gives a shit. Enjoy Grim Dawn and have a happy... Just enjoy Grim Dawn.